I can't tell you how many times I've gone to take a group shot and everyone looks great, but inevitably someone closes their eyes. I'm going to select both of these in Adobe Bridge, which I launched through File, Browse in Bridge. And Bridge has a number of automation features under the Tools menu, Photoshop. Specifically, I'm going to take these two shots taken without a tripod and have Photoshop assemble them into layers for me. So I've selected in Adobe Bridge, Tools, Photoshop, Load Files into Photoshop Layers. Once I do, I can click the eye icon next to Austria Crew 01 and see that his eyes are open. I click again, and in the second shot, everyone relaxed and smiled a little bit more, but unfortunately he closed his eyes. So before, after. You can also see by clicking the eye icon that since I didn't use a tripod, the shots aren't perfectly aligned. So what I'm going to do is select both using the Shift key and highlighting both layers in the Layers panel, and let Photoshop match them up for me. Under the Edit menu is Auto Align Layers, which was actually added in PhotoshopCS6, and I found a lot of people don't know it's there. The auto is the best setting, so I'll leave it and click OK. And it's done. I'm always waiting for a progress bar, but it's so much faster now. So now I click the eye icon, and you can see just a little movement because either the people moved or I moved slightly when taking the shot. And I've decided this is the better shot overall. I simply want his eyes open. So I'm going to take Austria Crew 02 by clicking on it once and dragging up. So now this is my top layer, and I want to use a layer mask to cut a hole here where his head is to reveal the layer underneath. To do that, I will click Add a Layer Mask at the bottom of the Layers panel. And you'll notice the mask is entirely white. If you've never worked with masks before, remember this: black blocks and white reveals. The function of a mask is to mask away or hide portions of an image. And using the brush tool, if I were to paint with white, nothing would happen because the entire mask is white currently. I'm going to hit the swap arrows to switch the foreground and background colors, and Photoshop tells me that X will do that. And I'm going to zoom in with Command plus or Control plus to see his head a bit better. Now this brush size is too small. I usually will go up here and dial it up to about the size of his head. And I just want to say off with his head, but we're not doing that. We're actually just opening his eyes. So here I can click and drag and reveal the open eyes. Now since his head moved slightly, I will have to paint in the whole top portion of his head. And I have to be careful because there's text behind his head, so I will paint the video to brain in as well so that that all lines up. And this is where it gets a little tricky. I actually picked a harder image because I can't tell you how many times someone says to me, "You made it look so easy in the video," and then they try with their own images and they find it more difficult. Sometimes I pick more difficult images just to show you that that's the real world. So here, the door is a little bit off center. I'm going to make my brush size smaller instead of using this arrow by using the left bracket on my keyboard. Next to the letter P, left bracket makes it smaller, right bracket makes it bigger. Just so much faster. And then I will swap my colors by hitting the swap arrows because white reveals, and I will click once, hold down Shift and click again. Clicking once and shift-clicking tells Photoshop to connect the dots. I do have a tricky portion here, and instead of swapping constantly to go between adding and revealing, I can simply use X. In fact, I'm going to leave that a little crooked and just clean it up with the clone stamp tool. That is far less work. And finally, on his head, I can hit X to go between adding and removing to straighten out his collar. X just goes to the previous shot or the next shot. There I could see I'm painting for the eyes closed shot. X and a little bigger brush, and paint with the eyes open shot. Just be very careful not to leave ghosts behind. So let's see how I did. If I hold down the Shift key and click to disable the mask, before, Shift click here on the black and white icon, after. A pretty good blend, and all I have to do is straighten out that little corner. There we go. So I don't need the bottom layer anymore. I'm committed to these changes. I'll select both layers, and you'll notice to preserve the file with layers would be 20.8 megabytes, but without layers or flattened, it would be 9. So I'll choose Layer, the Layer menu at the top of my screen, and Flatten Image. And now I can hit S for the stamp tool and simply stamp this so it's a straight line all the way across. If you haven't used the stamp tool, it takes some practice, but here is the 30-second guideline. Hold down Alt or Option and click once to choose to stamp from here. Let go of Alt and let go of your mouse, usually mouse first. Move over and the same right bracket key will make your brush bigger. And if this looks lined up, I simply click and drag, watching two birdies at once. The plus on the right is where it's cloning from. The circle on the left is where it's cloning to. And I make sure I let go periodically so that I have undos. That line is perfectly straight. Now let's fix it in this direction. Alt click or Option click. Move up a hair. It's straight. Click and drag. So you can come from above or you can come from below, but if I hit Control-0 or Command-0 to fit in window, no one would notice. And without showing the changes in the crop tool, I'll just crop using my rectangular marquee to get rid of that little bread that's showing in the background. So I'll just draw my desired area, maybe move it down a bit, and choose Image Crop. And now my file size is 7 megabytes, and if I really wanted to, I could remove that cigarette, but I'll just make it simpler and just crop it out. So, Image Crop. There we go. Deselect Command-D or Control-D, and that is your orientation to using Bridge to assemble two shots into layers in Photoshop, using Photoshop's Edit Auto Align layers to make them perfect, and adding a mask to cut through to get the best out of both shots.